All right, welcome to the Flow of Productivity workshop. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate your participation and attention. Hopefully you get some good value out of this workshop. And at the end, I'll throw out a little offer for you if you're interested. I'll tell you when it's coming in case you're like really averse to offers for really cool things. You can definitely jump off, but if you're interested, you can stick around for that. We're going to talk about productivity. I'm going to give you some tools. We're going to talk about flow states, and I'll give you some homework at the end for you to increase your productivity, really no matter what you're doing. That's the beauty of productivity and flow states. So without further ado, let's jump right in. I got some slides to share. ChatGPT was on point today with the images. So everybody can see that? Give me a yes in the chat or a thumbs up on your screen or something. Thank you. Cool. We're good to go. Okay, so the tagline here is like, let's get more done in one day than most do in a week. And as we go through this, you'll see this is not even hyperbole, and we may be even undershooting what's possible when we talk about actually leveraging the innate superpower that is flow states to get more done. So first of all, excuse me, throwing things in your face. First of all, why flow states? Why productivity in general? Why do we care about this at all? Well, productivity is about a lot more than just doing more with less. When you really get down to it, productivity is about giving yourself the freedom to do what you want. It's about focusing on what matters, whether that's growing your business, spending time with your loved ones, or pursuing your passions. True productivity helps you reclaim that life and that energy instead of constantly grinding and burning yourself out, doing work that, frankly, you may not even be that fulfilled with, may not have that much meaning in your life, but you got to pay bills and you got to do the things, and it can become a grind. So you're probably here because you have experienced some success in your life, but you know that there's more that you can achieve. Maybe you've hit a plateau. Maybe there's a gap between where you believe that you can be and where you think that maybe you should be, your highest potential, and where you're at right now and where you're stuck. So you're looking for a key to unlock it, and that's where flow states really can bridge that gap. So if you're already in that spot where you've been successful and you've achieved a lot already, and you may be asking yourself like, okay, what can flow really do for me? The reality is that even the highest achievers are going to face blocks. The Big Leap, which is a great book, basically says that, with each new level of success, we create new problems for ourselves. They're just bigger problems. So even if you're already successful, these plateaus, this chronic discomfort, this burnout, these things that are blocking your ability to get into flow are not because you're not working hard. They're just signals that something is off and you're not aligned and able to access that superpower of flow states. So you're here because you know that there's another level that you can access, essentially. Now, why should you care about flow states? Well, flow states are the secret weapon for the most elite performers in the world in anything. Flow states are accessible to everyone. We all have this innate neurobiological access point to flow, and it's where we feel our best and perform our best. It's where things feel effortless and each action flows seamlessly from one to the next. You don't have to think about it. You're just acting on instinct. And so things become much more efficient. And it's a highly enjoyable experience because of this neurochemical cocktail that is not seen anywhere else, endogenously or exogenously, with drugs and those type of things. So the big idea here is how can we compress a whole week's worth of work into a single day and feel more energized than before. And the metaphor that I like when I think about flow states is I played video games when I was younger. I don't know if you guys ever played Mario. But if you played Mario, you know when he catches that star and he just goes, nothing can stop him. He's just running through that level, like just smacking things off to the side. That's what flow feels like to me. And that's what ultimate productivity can feel like when you're in flow. Another example that actually just popped into my head that fits really well. Has anybody seen the movie Bruce Almighty with Jim Carrey, where God basically gives him all of his powers and he becomes God for a while? It's hilarious. It's hilarious. But in the movie, one of the first things he has to do is he has to start answering prayers. And he's got all these prayers that are in his head, and they're just like a cacophony of sound, like coming from everywhere. And so he has this bright idea. Let's take all these prayers and let's turn them into emails. And so then he gets on his like Yahoo Heaven account, and he's just got just a million emails with all these prayers. And the scene is like him grabbing a cup of coffee. He's like, all right, I'm gonna just sit down and do this. And he just goes a million miles an hour because he's God and he can do that. But that's literally what flow also feels like. It feels like the whole rest of the world just goes away and you are so involved and absorbed in the task at hand that nothing else can bother you and you are just gone, just going for it. Has anybody ever experienced a flow state? Does anybody know what I'm talking about here? Just throw in the chat like, yes, I get them every day, all the time. No, I've never experienced it. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, Brandon. Just let me know if you've experienced it. Not too sure. Okay. So another thing that is, yeah, so playing sports is a huge area where most of us would experience flow states. And that's why um, I like to work with athletes, because athletes tend to have more flow in their life, especially early on, because sports are just filled with flow triggers. Um, and some of the flow characteristics that you'll see that show up to know that you're in a flow state. The acronym is STIR, S-T-E-R. Flow states feel selfless. So your sense of self kind of goes away. In fact, your inner critic goes quiet, and all the self-doubt and all the second guessing that we usually do goes quiet. All that goes away. Your sense of self in another way goes away in that your actual physical body kind of merges with your surroundings or the activity. We call this the merger of action and awareness, where a surfer feels one with the wave. A musician feels no separation between them and their instrument. These are clear indications that someone has found the flow state. Second is timelessness. So we got selflessness, timelessness, where time dilates. It can speed way up in the case of like a car crash. If you've ever been a car crash and it slows down, excuse me, it slows down or speeds up. So a car crash, it slows way down and it's like frame by frame. You remember every minuscule moment like it's in slow motion. And then on the other side, it can speed way up, like having a conversation with a significant other or an old friend you haven't seen in a while, and 2 hours go by in a blink. Or a 4 hour, soccer match or football game seems like it's over like that. It's like, where did that time go? That's that timeless time dilation of a flow state. Next, you have E, which is effortlessness, where what you're doing just feels effortless. Like you can't do wrong. There's also what's called the paradox of control, where you're doing things where you may have never even attempted before. This is like a downhill skier who is on completely new trail in the trees and they're making moves that they've never even attempted. But they can because they're in a flow state and they're not having to think about it and they're making these lateral connections in their brain. So effortlessness, and then lastly, the R stands for richness, the richness of experience. Not only is it incredibly enjoyable and it's actually pain inhibiting because of all the endorphins that are released and all the dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine that gives us focus for free, and we just feel like we are in the zone and we feel amazing while we're in the state. The world around you and your sensory experience is actually heightened and things become more salient so that you feel a certain richness with the activity that you're doing and in the environment that you're in. Concerts are a good example of a whole group of people getting into flow states together, but at the individual level, concerts, when you're really into the music and it's something you really enjoy, you find this timelessness, selflessness with the crowd and the music, and a very rich experience. They enhance that a lot these days with visuals and with the actual sound apparatus. But even without, you have a certain richness of experience that you feel when you watch live music. Um, so that's STER, S-T-E-R, selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness of experience. Those are like really common characteristics that show up in flow states. There are others, which we'll get into a little bit later, but those ones are big ones. So sports is really common, music, really common, creative pursuits, basically any hobbies that we have and anything we would do for free, there's a good chance that that is where you're finding flow. But the point of this whole presentation is that we can take that and we can use that to find it in other areas of our life, specifically here around our tasks for our business, for our work, whatever, wherever we want to be more productive in our life. So that's kind of the idea here. So let me turn these slides back on. Get Mario back up here for a second. And let's talk about the problem. Like, what's going on? Why are people not productive these days? Well, the big one is the focus dilemma, right? It's constantly battling distractions in a hyper-connected world. Like if you look at this image that ChatGPT came up with when I just said, show me the most distracted person possible. Look at all this stuff. Like even the painting on the wall is sitting on her phone, right? He's got a million things pulling his attention in different directions. What I thought was actually interesting, because I did not put this into the prompt for ChatGPT, was all of the junk food that they put on the desk as distractions. Because we don't often think about that, like the things that we put into our body, nutrition-wise, how they affect our brain and how they affect our attention or our ability to pay attention. So I thought that was really interesting. But anyway, distractions are a huge issue when it comes to productivity. Probably the biggest issue. It's taking you out of flow states, and they're constant. We have to always be on and available in our world these days. Emails, notifications, the pull of social media, all of these things fragment your attention and they make deep work very challenging. And this is a problem because the inability to focus keeps you from accessing flow and your highest levels of productivity and creativity. Creativity and flow are almost synonymous. You can't really separate the two. You can't really have creativity without flow states because of the way that your brain changes in its function to access more disparate or lateral parts of your brain, which is kind of the definition of creativity. Great book by a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who is like the godfather of flow states, called Creativity. And he kind of shows how flow states and the creativity cycle match up really nicely. Anyway, when we're stuck in this like constantly doing shallow work, we just are reactive and we're just doing busy work and our productivity really stagnates. The second big problem is the burnout cycle. This is especially true for high achievers, really successful people that get stuck in this like time for money or other traps that keep you grinding, trying to do more with the same, but we're focusing on the wrong things. You're focusing on the input and the work and constantly trying to work harder in order to create more output. We're going to solve this in a second with like one word that will change your perspective on this problem. But the issue with the burnout cycle is that you're always pushing your limits, and we're stuck in this like thought process that we have to continue to grind and work harder in order to do more and get more done. That burnout means energy, motivation starts to deplete. You get stuck in the cycle of productivity followed by exhaustion and recovery. Start the process over again. It just becomes all consuming, and it's a downward cycle. It's a downward spiral that ends in illness and depression. So it not only affects performance and productivity, but overall well-being and long-term success. It's the hugest barrier to sustainable success. Forcing people to take extended breaks. Like this 2-week vacation model that we have in the US, like grind yourself until you have to take a vacation for 2 weeks and then just try and go forget about your problems and then come right back into it, is not a good model. That's not how it should be, right? We should be enjoying our work. We should be thrilled to be there and feel energized after we have a really productive day, right? So the burnout cycle is a huge problem, stopping people from being more productive. And lastly is the plateau paradox, like hitting ceilings despite increasing your effort. It should work that when we increase our effort, we should get more done and we should climb that hill. But a lot of times, the new tools, optimizing schedules, adding more hours, you're just going to hit a ceiling. The strategies that once worked start to having diminishing returns, and it's leading to worse outcomes. This is super frustrating because even though you're doing everything right, you start to lose motivation and feel helpless because you're hitting these plateaus and you're not able to have the same gains that you were experiencing early on. So if you continue down this path, you basically end up risking like short-term productivity for long-term health. You start sacrificing your health and your relationships and your long-term success by grinding, and trying to get more done in the short term. By ignoring the faulty model of productivity that we have right now, you risk failure in the long run because you get stuck in the perpetual burnout cycle. You hit plateaus and you start to feel disconnected from your own work, your own life, and then even your loved ones. It starts to spill over into everything that you do. Okay, so not a pretty future if we just like stay on this grind all the time. Now, what do you actually want? What do we all want? We want to get our time back. We want sustainable high performance so that we can then choose what we want to do with our life. What that little alert was. That was annoying. So you want to get your time back. You want to be as productive as you can be while not sacrificing all of your time in order to do it. Because we all have a life, and our work is not our entire life. We have relationships, we have hobbies, we have other flow activities that we want to pursue, passions that we like to do outside of our work. And if your passion is your work, beautiful. That's amazing. But we all still have different facets of our life that we want to give our time to. So getting our time back is probably the most important and highest desire that we have. So we want to achieve that high level of productivity without burning out and finding a way to immerse yourself in your work without distraction so that you can get so much more done with less time and be able to do the things that you want to do outside of that. The next thing is to feel energized. Instead of feeling burnt out, we should be in a place where we can focus intently on our work, get everything we need to get done, and actually feel energized after doing it. I know it feels kind of counterintuitive, But imagine like a good workout. Yeah, you feel like tired afterward, but give it 30 minutes or an hour and you actually have more energy to take throughout the rest of your day. Has anybody experienced that before? Just say yes in the chat if you've ever had a time where you're like, I just kicked my own ass on in this sport or this workout. Yeah, thanks, Amar. But then you actually feel better after exerting a bunch of effort, right? And that is kind of one of the really big benefits of flow states is that yes, it's very energy demanding, but it actually leaves you with more energy and builds capacity for the future afterward. So we want to be able to feel energized with the work that we do. And part of that comes from having fulfillment and meaning in your work, which is what flow states can also give you. So lastly, we want breakthrough results. Like we want to continue our growth and get better without hitting these plateaus. You want to achieve the next level of success. You don't want to get stuck. You don't want to get stalled. And that leads to the desired future of like waking up every day energized, clear-headed, excited to dive into the work that makes you feel both meaningful and it's manageable because you've got productivity on point, not by working harder, but by using things like leverage and flow states to access this state of deep focus so that you are focused on the exact thing you need to do and without distractions and not wasting time on things that are not productive. So in a few hours, you can get done more than you used to do in a full day, leaving you time to pursue your passions, strengthen your relationships, and enjoy your life outside of work, right? You want to constantly evolve, reach new heights, do all these things. So how do we do it? Or what are we actually going to do? We've got basically 5 big ideas for you, okay? And these all revolve around, well, the first one does not revolve around flow states, although flow is a huge part of it. But there are other ideas that are even easier than flow states, okay? And the first one is leverage. So do we all know what the concept of leverage means? Like a lever, like this guy has here. It's not exactly perfect here, but you know what I mean? Like it has an arm, it's got something, yeah, it's a thing to help you. So it's got a weight on one end, you've got your input over here, the strong guy trying to lift this thing. He's got this fulcrum here. If this fulcrum is way over here, he's got very little leverage. It's going to be really hard to lift. Sorry, on the other end, it's going to be really hard for him to lift this thing with this fulcrum way over here. But if he moves it closer, creating more leverage, it'll be a lot easier to lift this heavy object. This is the concept that I want you to think about when you think about productivity, okay? Flow is one of the biggest things you can use to leverage your time because it's going to enable you to work fewer hours producing more output. Because here's the thing. Let me skip ahead to this equation here. This is all productivity is, right? This is the most important thing you need to remember when it comes to productivity, because this is kind of the paradigm shattering thing about what our current model looks like. So productivity is nothing more than your input cost versus your output value. That's productivity. If I put in 10 units of energy and I get out 10 shovel loads of dirt, that's my output value. That's how productive I am. Okay, we can call that productivity of 1. If I use a bigger shovel and I put in 8 units of input, so 8 shovel loads, but I get more because I have a bigger shovel out of those. So I get 12 outputs. I'm more productive, right? It's really that simple. So if we want to increase our productivity, we need to increase our output value relative to our input cost. So we either increase our output in whatever way possible, or we just decrease our input. And so we'll wait for the how before I tell you exactly how to do that. But let's go through these first. So we want to use leverage. Some other ways to use leverage is just being extremely intentional about what you prioritize and making the quality of the output really high. Making rules so you decide once and you apply it endlessly so you don't have to think. This is like the Steve Jobs wearing the black turtleneck every day. He doesn't have to think, so he has more capacity to make decisions elsewhere in places that are more important. Get better at a skill. The better you are at a skill, the more productive you will be and more efficient. The big one is people. Ask who, not how. You can create a ton of leverage by building a team around you that can help you with the tasks that are not in your zone of genius. Then you can build systems around the things that you do all the time. And you can use technology. Code it once, use it forever. Okay, so leverage is an incredible way to decrease your input and increase your output exponentially. Leverage is infinite. You can increase your leverage infinitely, but you cannot increase your input infinitely. There is a ceiling on how much we can work. That's just how it is. But we can always increase our leverage. So that's probably the most important idea that you need to understand. And then the rest of these are going to be about flow states, because flow states are where we are our most productive and most efficient. It's where our brain is working the most optimally, our brain and body together to get things done. So the two huge triggers for flow that we're going to talk about are clear goals and the challenge skills balance. Clear goals are how we prioritize and eliminate all distractions. Clear goals work by increasing norepinephrine in your brain, which is our focusing chemical. It drives our attention. When we have clear goals, and I'm talking like almost to a ridiculous level of detail, we increase norepinephrine. It's easier to focus. We increase dopamine because we know the anticipation of what's coming next and what we need to do and focus on because we have it all laid out. And it is so much easier to eliminate distractions when you know exactly what the next step is. So let's use the example of a writer. A writer, let's say that I'm writing a blog post about productivity. And before I get into that, I'm going to be super specific about what I want to accomplish in this. Because if I'm not, as I sit down at the computer, I'm gonna inevitably go into this mode of what's called divergent thinking, where it's like, okay, I know I need to write this article about productivity. Okay, well, there's that one book by Cal Newport called Deep Work. That'll be really useful. Let me go grab that. Okay, now I'm back. Okay, now what do I need to talk about with productivity? Well, I could talk about this and I could talk about that. Oh, yeah, but then there's that one research study. I need to go find that and read that really quick so that I know if it's going to be this thing. You know, do you see what I'm saying? How your mind just starts going in a million different directions. What clear goals does is it helps you narrow your focus so you know exactly what the steps are. You know exactly what comes next. So you do not allow divergent thinking to take over. What we want in this stage is convergent thinking. And this helps us find flow because it increases those neurochemicals. And those are kind of the precursors for the flow state. It also helps us get through the first stage of the flow cycle, which is the struggle phase. Every flow state you've ever had works in a 4-stage cycle, the first of which is the struggle phase. And it's called struggle because it feels like a struggle, because it's frustrating. In the example of the writer, I sit down and I have all of this research that I'm trying to hold in my head. Hopefully I've done my work and I've got some clear goals. So I know, okay, here's the outline. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this. And then I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to end with this. I have this research, this research, this research. I'm only going to use those three sources because that's all I need. Here's the intent of the art, like going down in the detail. So I know exactly what to do next. So there is no distraction or divergence from what I'm doing. Okay. It helps you get through this struggle phase and drop into a flow state because it keeps you on task. Because inevitably you're going to be frustrated. But in those moments of frustration are the most prevalent times where people give in to distraction. The biggest killer of productivity is people that are in the struggle phase in the start of a task or even before they're procrastinating because they're stuck in this struggle and they don't have a clear idea of what exactly they need to do. So when things get frustrating, even a little bit, they give into distraction. They pick up the phone. They leave the computer and they go read an article about something else. They go clean their bathroom. I've literally done that before. I hate cleaning my bathroom, but I did that instead of doing the work in front of me because I was so frustrated and I didn't have clear goals. Like, this is exactly what needs to happen next. If you don't know what's coming next, it's really easy to go do something else. So clear goals help you get through the struggle phase. They increase these focusing neurochemicals in your brain and they drive you into flow. It's a big flow trigger. So first one is clear goals. Second is the challenge skills balance. This is like the golden rule of flow. Your skill level, no matter where it is, needs to be stretched in order for you to find flow and find your maximum efficiency and productivity. The challenge, another way to say this is the challenge needs to be just above your current level of skill. You have to push yourself into discomfort just a little bit. The magic rule here is 4%. Okay. If you can push yourself 4% above your current skill level in whatever you're doing, you are much, much more likely to find flow. This works again because of the requirement of your brain to focus on things that are hard. You have to pay more attention when things are difficult. So the example with the writer, really easy way to increase challenge is to add constraints. And we kind of talked about this with the leverage equation. If I want to increase my output relative to my input cost, one thing I can do is just reduce the input. So in terms of time, this is what I was alluding to earlier, is if you want to be more productive, just work less. I can hear your eyes rolling at me. But it's true. Follow me on this. If I want to increase output relative to input cost, because that's all that matters in productivity, is right. How much input are we giving for how much output we are getting? If I can get the same amount of output, let's say it's 10 units of dirt shoveled again, but instead of 10 units of input, 10 shovelfuls, I only do 5. I still have the same output, but relative to my input, it's doubled. My productivity has doubled. So if I can write my blog article in half the time, I've doubled my productivity. Yes? So one way to increase leverage, increase your output, is to just lower your input, to work less. And this also increases challenge because I have to get the same amount of output, but I have to work less. So, okay, how am I going to do that? Well, that's going to focus my attention. It's going to make me eliminate the fluff. I don't get to research for 10 hours. I got to take what I know. Maybe I have to have an expert interview for 30 minutes, which I'll get way more out of it than trying to learn through 6 books at one time. You see what I'm saying? Then your mind starts to think differently about how I can get this done with less input. So when you put constraints on yourself, constraints produce creativity, or constraints foster creativity, maybe is a better way to say that. So if you want to increase your challenge, add constraints or make it harder, make the jump a little higher, push yourself a little bit harder on the things that you're skilled at. The other huge benefit of this is you're going to get more skilled at the thing you're doing, which is going to increase your efficiency, thus increasing your output more. So the challenge skills balance is the golden rule of flow, and it will increase your productivity. And it kind of becomes more fun because it becomes like a game. Okay. Next, biorhythms. Leverage your innate biology in order to find more flow and to get into deep work and to be more efficient with the way that your body actually works, because your body runs in cycles. There are certain rhythms that happen every day. So the really easy example of this is your circadian rhythm. It is the daily rhythm or diurnal rhythm that's based off of sunlight and dark cycles, sleep and wake cycles. A lot of things are based on that rhythm. That's not the one I'm talking about though. Other rhythms are called infradian rhythms. Those are much longer. Think of like the tides, not the tides, but the moon, the cycles of the moon. And then the ones we're talking about here are called ultradian rhythms. These are much shorter rhythms, like your sleep cycles. They're generally 90 to 120 minutes long, and you have multiple of these rhythms throughout the night when you sleep and throughout the day. So the flow cycle, those 4 stages, generally sits really nicely on top of this ultradian rhythm. Interestingly enough, like we talked about earlier, the creativity cycle also sits really nicely on top of this flow cycle. They're like one and the same. So 90 to 120 minutes is what you want to put aside for your deep, focused work. And for most people, based on chronobiology, and if you want to read a cool book on this, it's called The Power of When by Michael Bruce. And there's a couple others out there, but I like that one a lot. He talks about these chronorhythms or chronobiology and how people tend to fall in different categories of when they do their best work. For something like 70% of the population, your best deep work, where you're going to be most productive based on your own biology, is going to be somewhere in the morning between the hours of 7 to 2 p.m. For a lot of people, it's going to peak right around that 10 a.m. mark, where everything's kind of aligned and you feel the most energy and able to focus on deep work. For night owls, it flips and it's different. And for early birds that get up like really early, sometimes that is like they want to do it right away. I'm talking like 4 in the morning. They're going to get most of their deep work done. So you will know yourself a little bit better than I will know you, right? So you can play with these things. If you know you're kind of that middle of the road type person, you want to put your deep focused work with clear goals and a little bit of challenge early on in the day. Save your meetings, save your client work, save your reactive busy work for the afternoon when you're actually a little bit lower in the energy, right? Where you can just be more reactive. Like, what's coming at me? Okay, I'll take that on. I'll do this. I'll do this. You don't have to be as productive in those times. The worst thing you can do for your productivity is to wake up and then immediately go into answering emails, meetings with team members that are probably bogus and don't even need to happen, right? Time wasters that are not productive. Save that time for your deep work and do the creative reactive work later. Okay. Follow the flow cycle. If you know you're in struggle, keep pushing. And after you start to feel a little dip in your efficiency, if we use the writing example again, and this is actually common for me personally, I can generally have the capacity to write and be in flow for about 45 minutes. That's all. And then I notice that I start to slip. And it usually happens really like insidiously. It's like very, very small things, like my fingers, like the Bruce Almighty, they just kind of pause for a second because a word didn't just come to me effortlessly. Then I know, oh, okay, I'm starting to come out of the flow state. Take a second, and I'll take a 2 to 5 minute break. I'm going to do some neuro drills, like we'll talk about in a second, to get fuel and activation to my brain, drop me right back into flow, and I can go right back into it. But I've learned to pay attention and be mindful of my biorhythms and when they start to change, and then I can use nervous system inputs to the brain to get it back in there. So be aware of your biorhythms and how they work, and we can use neurodrills to kind of manipulate those things. Lastly is fuel and activation, and it kind of follows along that. Your brain needs glucose. It runs on glucose. Yes, you can use ketones, but it prefers glucose, and ketogenesis or ketosis, excuse me, is a stressful state for the body. It's a lot of cortisol. So let's just like put that to the side for all my keto peeps out there, which I love the ketogenic diet for a lot of things. But for optimal productivity over the long term, which is key, we have to prioritize glucose and oxygen. Okay? Glucose and oxygen, however we can get them to the brain, is going to be incredibly important for getting into flow, number one, and being very productive, and also sustaining it, keeping us in flow, and sustaining high productivity over the long term. All right. So how do we do this? Well, I have a worksheet for you. So let me just switch this around. Oops. Okay. This is a Notion document that I'm going to give to you guys. All you got to do is you'll get this link, and I'll put the link in the chat, but I'll also post it in the community. You're gonna have to get an account with Notion. I do all my note taking and work in Notion. And all you gotta do is just press this duplicate button and it will copy it into your Notion account. I think you could probably transfer it to like Google Drive or something. I don't know. But if you don't use Notion, it's pretty cool. But anyway, that's where this worksheet lives. Duplicate it into your own, and you can go through and fill this out and work it. And we basically have these 5 big ideas, and there's like little questions that you can brainstorm to see, like in terms of leverage, how can I increase my output if I was forced to cut my work hours in half, right? Let's get you thinking a little bit differently about how you can increase output relative to your input. Because what I don't want you to do is work more hours and just keep grinding in the same way that we've been doing forever. Okay. And then here's a bunch of other sources of leverage. How can you prioritize and eliminate ruthlessly? Okay. How can you use something like the Eisenhower matrix to decide, make a list of all the things that you need to do or think that you need to do in your business, in your work, whatever, and use this. If it's important and it's urgent, do it right now. If it's urgent but not important, defer, do it later. If it's important but it's not urgent, delegate it to somebody else. If you're a business owner, get yourself an assistant, a VA. If you have an assistant, have them do it. Have an intern do it. I'm sure you can find somebody that you can delegate those things that are not important or not urgent to, but they still need to get done. If it's not urgent and it's not important, just delete it. Get it out of your life. Eliminate it. Okay? So prioritize and eliminate like a boss. Make rules that you can decide once and apply forever. Wear the same shirt every single day. Take one decision off of your plate. Eat the same food every single day. Wake up at the same time for sure. Right? Have standards and rules that you follow and stick to. Next, learning. Choose what you're going to learn and put into your brain, because you will become the things that you read about. And if you have the right knowledge, it's going to enable accurate work, because part of this whole productivity thing is being incredibly accurate with the tasks that you do, and not like spray and pray where you're doing a whole bunch of different things that are not driving you forward to the most important goal that you have at the moment. Same thing with skill development. If you develop better skills, you get more output per unit input. You become more efficient. Flow is the ultimate efficiency hack. Find more flow. People, ask who can do it, not how. Spelled that wrong. This is kind of like the delegate thing, but it's also, use myself as an example again. Like, I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, but my zone of genius is in coaching and developing content, but I'm not a marketing genius. Even though I have degrees in it, it's just not the thing that I love to do. And I don't have a passion for it. I do it, but it's not accurate work for me. So I hired somebody to take that off my plate. Now I can focus on things like this workshop, the things that I enjoy doing and that I'm very good at. And that's going to drive the business forward much faster and allows me to be way more productive when I have other people on my team taking care of the things that they are very good at. Okay, systems. Can you build a system around things that you do all the time? I have a system for building content like this workshop. It makes it much easier because it makes clear goals even clearer and repeatable. And then technology is the bee's knees. I used AI to do all of the images for this presentation. It was so fast. Love it. Okay. So those are some other sources of leverage. Next up is clear goals. Ideally, the night before, write down 1 to no more than 3. 1 is best, 3 is okay. Never do more than 3. Priorities and tasks for the following day that need to get done, and then go into excruciating detail of the things that need to happen in order to get it done. If you're writing the blog, step 1 is open the word processing document. Step 2 is write the title, right? Like excruciating detail. Write out the outline. This shouldn't take more than like 5 minutes to do this, but set a timer for 5 minutes, right? Increase your challenge a little bit and get out all the things that you need to do. It'll make it so much easier to stay on task. Okay, next, challenge, skills, balance. This is where flow sits. Goodness. Right between skills and challenge, okay? If you're too skilled and the challenge is too low, you're going to be bored. If the challenge is too high for your current skill level, you're going to be in anxiety here. Flow sits in between. So push your challenge up just a little bit beyond your skill level. Next up, brain state amplifiers. These are flow hacks. Biorhythms, schedule 90 to 20 minutes, 120 minutes, eliminate distractions, work in your recovery time. Don't work in your recovery time, but work it into your schedule. This is kind of confusing when I read it out loud. Another thing you can do is called wake and flow, especially if you're an early morning person, because flow sits on the border of the alpha theta brainwave frequencies. Sleep fluctuates between theta and delta. By the way, our normal brainwave frequencies sit at beta, which is much higher. Like we're all in a beta brainwave frequency right now. A little faster waves. Flow is much slower. So if you wake up and you go straight into your high flow activity or your highest leverage work, you're more likely to kind of wake up in a flow state. It's kind of a cool little hack that you can try. And you can use music. Binaural beats are great to actually get you into the alpha theta range. So the beats you want to look for alpha or theta frequencies of binaural beats. And any music without lyrics, EDM or electronic dance music that's a little higher tempo, it's actually kind of more helpful. But even classical music, stuff without lyrics is what you want to shoot for, because of the way that music interacts with the brain and helps you kind of slow brain waves down and get into flow. Fuel and activation, prioritize brain fuel. Here's a little brain boost tonic that I often use. It's got good amounts of glucose and fructose, so it doesn't spike your blood sugar, because you do not want to spike your blood sugar and then have a crash. So orange juice, coconut water, some sea salt for electrolytes, cream of tartar for some potassium, more electrolytes, and then a little bit of lemon to add some acid for the metabolizing of the glucose. Lastly, neurodrills. You've got a whole bunch of neurodrills in the community. If you're not part of the school community, get your butt in there, get into the DIY neuro training, and you'll see all of these drills in there. Test them out with your assess and reassess process. These are great drills for brain fuel, driving oxygen and activation of the whole brain. And that's actually how they're laid out, is oxygen, 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 activating the different systems, vestibular, visual, and proprioceptive, and then integrating all of them and activating the frontal lobe, which allows our focus and attention. So I would just go through them, boom, just like that. Okay. So the worksheet's in there. I'll share it in the community. And I think the rest of these are just oh yeah, now here's what you're gonna do. Homework, find some leverage sources, prioritize, define clear goals, tweak your challenge and skills, set aside time for surfing your biorhythms, do your high value tools, and use nutrition. Basically all the things we just talked about. Okay, that's your homework. All right, so I think somebody is a little late. Maybe the time change got them. So that is the flow of productivity. Thank you guys for being here. The offer I wanted to throw out is for the paid community that is just starting up. The paid community is a place where this workshop is going to live. So I'm gonna put it up in the free community for about 48 hours. So anybody that wants to watch the replay, absolutely go do that. The worksheet is yours, right, forever if you downloaded it, if you catch the replay. But it's going to disappear. And I'm going to start putting some of this stuff into the paid community, where we're going to go through the entire NeuroFlow program, which is 12 weeks, and that's going to be hosted in that community as well. It's just going to be a much more focused and intent, with clear goals to get you from burnt out, in pain, unproductive, and whatever else is going on, to that highly productive, efficient flow junkie that is finding peak states on demand. The community is, let me just put a link to it. And you can join it for free. There you go. So just go to that link and you can join the community. Like I said, that replay will sit in there for about 48 hours. And then it'll be moved to the paid community. The offer that's only going to be available for the short time, basically the next 48 hours, is to join the community at a steep discount and lock in that price basically forever. So because it's brand new and we're going to be building it together, it's going to be at a lower price starting out for probably just the next 48 hours, maybe for the first like 20 people that get in there and jump on it. But anyway, that's the offer. So if anybody's interested in that, I'll put it in there with the replay, and you can just comment on that, and I'll send you like a document so you can read it over and decide for yourself. You don't need to decide now, but anyway, I appreciate all your energy and attention. Thank you guys for being here, for showing up. I hope you found some value out of this. I hope it's helpful for you in your productivity journey and it helps you find more flow. If you have any questions or feedback, please, hit me up in the community, share it with everybody, and we'll see you around. Okay, bye everybody.